Good afternoon. Let's call today's Board of Trustees meeting to order at 4:01 p.m. Trudy, if you could please call the roll.
Belkowski,
Present.
Epic,
Here.
McNamee, Nunley,
Here.
Pismo, Sheets,
Here.
Stanger, here, Swanson,
Here.
Zibble.
Here. Thank you, Trudy. If we could please stand for the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
In our first order of business, I will turn the meeting over to our legal counsel, Mr. Dines, who will be swearing in our new trustee, Miss Laura Pismo.
Okay. Ms. Pismo, if you raise your right hand and repeat after me, please. I state your name.
I, Laura Pismo,
Solemnly swear and affirm
solemnly swear and affirm
that I will support the Constitution
that I will support the Constitution
and laws of the United States of America
and laws of the United States of America
and the state of Ohio,
and the state of Ohio,
and that I will honestly,
and that I will honestly,
faithfully, and impartially
faithfully, and impartially
perform and discharge
perform and discharge
the duties of trustee for Laketran
the duties of trustee for Laketran
according to the best of my abilities,
according to the best of my abilities,
and that I will not be personally
and that I will not be personally
interested directly or indirectly
interested directly or indirectly
in any contract let by Laketran.
in any contract led by Laketran.
Okay, congratulations.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Well, thank you and welcome, Laura. Are there any public comments in the room today?
No.
Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the Laketran Board of Trustees Board Meeting Minutes of July 25th, 2022?
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Swanson. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Epic. Trudy, if you could please call the roll.
Epic,
Yes.
McNamee, Nunley,
Yes.
Pismo,
Abstain.
Sheets,
Yes.
Stanger,
Yes.
Swanson,
Yes.
Zibble.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. And at this time, I'm going to turn the meeting over to Ben. Would you like to do an introduction for our guest?
Yeah, so first I'd like to introduce Jake Altman. He is from the Auditor of State's office to present us with a award of distinction. So Mr. Altman, if you could just push the button so your microphone is green so the YouTube audience can hear you.
All right, happy to be here today on behalf of Auditor of State Keith Faber to present Laketran with the Auditor of State Award with distinction. This award puts you in the top 3 to 5% of entities across the state when it comes to compliance and to fiscal reporting, and it so obviously puts you in the upper echelon of the entities we audit across the state. It speaks to the professionalism and the commitment to fiscal integrity of everybody here at Laketran, from the board, the staff, and especially speaks to the leadership and the professionalism of Ms. Colling and her team in the finance department. Congratulations.
Thank you, Jake. We appreciate you coming all the way up here to hand out that presentation. I will leave it here. And then I guess we just go on with the
Yeah,
audit.
so thanks
Because
very much.
kind of, we should be thanking Zupka too, because they're the
Right.
ones that also perform our audit. And I'm gonna let Kyle come up here.
Jake, you're welcome to stay if you like, but you're also welcome to.
Thank you, Jake.
Thank you. Next, we have Kyle Dougherty from Zepke and Associates to present the 2021 audit and CAFR.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for having me here today. As mentioned, my name's Kyle Dougherty. I'm one of the managing partners at Zepke and Associates. You're probably familiar with dealing with Sujata Solzer from our office. She's been the managing partner over the audit side of our firm for many years. And I just came on as a managing partner at the beginning of this year. So I'm excited to be representing our firm and working with everyone here going forward. So I have a few items I was going to go over related to the audit. First off, I'll mention that the audit has already been, of course, submitted and approved by the Auditor of State's Office. So it is now available on their website to the public for anyone who wishes to view it there. The main thing I'll start off with is going to be our independent auditor's report. That's essentially the meat of what we provide as part of the audit procedures, where we are offering our opinion over the financial statements. So to start off, the Laketran presents financial statements as comparative for the current year and the prior year. So we perform the audit over the December 31, 2021 and 2020 financial statements and the related notes to those financial statements. And that collectively comprises the Laketran's basic financial statements. And in our opinion, the financial statements were fairly presented in all material respects for that period. We perform our audit under auditing standards generally accepted in the United States of America, and also to the standards contained in government auditing standards issued by the Comptroller General of the United States. Our auditor's opinion has some additional description as far as what our responsibilities are under those standards, as well as what management of Laketran's responsibilities are. Main thing that it points out is that we're required to be independent of Laketran and to meet other ethical responsibilities in performing the audit. And we believe the audit evidence that we obtained is sufficient and appropriate to provide the basis for our opinion. For anyone who happens to be familiar with auditors' reports, there was a change in standards that took effect with this reporting period. So the auditor's opinion is a little bit different as far as what's contained within it this year. In essence, the procedures that we perform haven't changed in any manner, but just the information that's included in the report's a little bit different. So there's some more detail as far as management's responsibilities and our responsibilities over the financial statements. Main thing for management is that it notes that management is responsible for designing, implementing, and maintaining internal control relevant to preparing the fair presentation of the financial statements. And that management this is a new statement for this year, and the standard opinion is that management is required to evaluate if there's any conditions or events that would raise substantial doubt about the entity's ability to continue as a going concern, of which there are none. It's just a new statement that they include in here to say that management has to consider that. Our responsibilities in performing the audit is to provide an opinion that the financial statements are free from material misstatement. The auditor's opinion describes exactly what we mean by material misstatement. That would essentially be a misstatement that if there'd be a substantial likelihood, if individually or in the aggregate, such misstatements would influence the judgment of a reasonable user of the financial statements. Also notes that the risk of not detecting a material misstatement from fraud is higher than that of one resulting from error. And then in performing the audit, we have to exercise professional judgment, maintain professional skepticism throughout the audit. We do risk assessments over Laketran and to identify what areas of the audit or areas of the entity we need to focus on for the audit procedures. We evaluate accounting policies, and then we can conclude if in our judgment there's any events that would raise substantial doubt about Laketran's ability to continue as a going concern. Any significant matters that come up throughout the audit, whether for internal control deficiencies or other issues, we would be required to communicate those with management and governance of the entity as depending on the severity of those issues. There's an emphasis of matter paragraph. This is not unique to Laketran, just discussing that the financial impact of COVID-19 and the continuing measures related to that may impact the future periods, and that our opinion is not modified in relation to that. One thing to note is the Auditor of State's Office did perform the audit last year. This is the first year of the current audit contract with our firm. That's also noted in the opinion letter. And then I won't go into too much detail about these last couple of sections, but there's some other information with the report, the parts that consist the comprehensive annual report and a few other areas where we have slightly different responsibilities as far as auditing procedures. And that's described a bit in the opinion letter as well. The main thing to take away from all this is that Laketran has a unmodified or clean audit opinion over the financial statements. The next thing I'm going to touch on is going to be what was in the single audit package, which is going to include our report over internal control, and then also our report on compliance for the major federal programs. First item in the single audit package is the schedule of expenditures of federal awards. Laketran expended about $22.6 million of federal awards in 2021. As usual, that all falls within the federal transit cluster of federal programs. So we audit those programs as one item essentially for Laketran. For our report on internal control, as part of the audit of the financial statements, we have to consider Laketran's internal control over financial reporting to determine the audit procedures that are appropriate for expressing our opinion over the financial statements. Just to notice that we do not provide an opinion over the effectiveness of internal control itself. We just evaluate it as necessary to provide our financial statement opinion. So we do not express an opinion on Laketran's internal control. But as described also in the report here is that if there were any deficiencies in internal control that raised to the level of being called a material weakness or a significant deficiency, we would be required to report those in this internal control letter. And during the audit, we did not have any deficiencies of that nature that were identified. Then we also review compliance with Laketran's compliance with certain provisions of laws, regulations, contracts, grant agreements. And similarly, we did not disclose any instances of non-compliance that needed to be reported here, but also noting that there could be control deficiencies or non-compliance that we did not identify as part of the audit due to the scope of what we look at versus all internal controls and compliance required of Laketran. And the last report that we have in the single audit report is our report on compliance for each major federal program. We follow the Office Management and Budget's compliance supplement to determine what testing we need to do for the single audit, which is the review of federal expenditures for Laketran. And the major federal program is the Federal Transit Cluster. And in our opinion, Laketran complied in all material respects with the types of compliance requirements referred to in the compliance supplement that could have a direct and material effects on the major federal program. And the rest of this report is very similar to the auditor's opinion discussing the standards that we follow in performing the audit, what management's responsibilities are, and what our auditor's responsibilities are. Again, very similar to the financial statement opinion, so I'm not going to go over that in further detail unless anyone has any questions there. Then we have a report on internal control over compliance specific to the federal award programs. Again, similar items there where we did not identify any deficiencies in internal control related to the federal programs that need to be reported here. And then lastly, our report on the schedule of expenditures of federal awards, just noting what our procedures are there and how we compare that to the information we gathered during the financial statement audit, and to say that the schedule of federal awards is fairly stated in comparison to the basic financial statements. So again, overall, all the opinion for the financial statements, our internal control letter, and the single audit report, we had no issues in any of those, no control deficiencies that needed to be reported. And the last thing I will touch on for our reporting is going to be our management letter. And what that is for any items that we note during the audit that don't rise to the level of being a audit finding as far as material weaknesses or significant deficiencies, we will issue a management letter just noting what our recommendations are if there's certain things in internal control or otherwise that we note that could be improvements to Laketran's operations. And in the last audit period, we did have a recommendation related to disaster recovery planning and testing. Essentially, we were recommending that Laketran design and implement a disaster recovery plan in terms of information technology. What that would be is a plan so that if something were to happen, whether it be a natural disaster or some other incident that shut down IT operations, that Laketran has a written policies and procedures in place to be able to continue operations on a timely basis. And so at the time that we completed the audit, the management was in the process of developing that plan. It wasn't fully implemented yet. So that's why we had the management letter comment related to completing the development and implementing that disaster recovery plan. One thing that was requested of us is that after we completed the audit, the disaster recovery plan was completed. So we did review that subsequent to completing the audit. And you'll have a copy of a letter that our firm issued noting that we reviewed the disaster recovery plan that was developed over the summer. And in terms of what we look for financial audit procedures, we find that the disaster recovery plan meets the recommendations of what we're recommending to be implemented for Laketran. I just want to note that we look at this from a financial auditing standpoint. We're certainly not IT specialists, so it's incumbent on Laketran's management to continually evaluate that disaster recovery plan and to update it periodically and to perform testing of the plan to make sure that it's going to perform when they need to. So we did read through the plan to see that it had all the items that we would expect to see in a disaster recovery plan, such that for the 2022 audit, with that plan being implemented, we would not have a management letter comment. We would consider our recommendation to have been implemented. But again, just wanted to note that we recommend that plan be evaluated at least annually, and that testing be performed to make sure that it will operate effectively if it is needed. So that covers everything that we issue as far as the audit report, our opinions, and all the other letters. Last thing I was just going to touch on a little bit was some of the content of the annual financial report itself, just kind of pointing out a few things that changed from 2020 to 21 operationally for Laketran. So everything I'm going to pull is from the management discussion and analysis section of the annual comprehensive report. That's the management's summary of significant changes from the prior year there. So really the main thing to take away from that is that certainly with the pandemic, the funding that Laketran received from COVID-19 funding and everything that had changed from year to year from 2020 to 21 had a pretty significant impact on the financials of Laketran. But overall, I mean, everything was really no downside, I guess I want to say. Everything is looking good operationally as far as the financial numbers. Overall, Laketran's revenues increased from 2020 to 21. There's a significant increase in sales tax revenue. That was due to the tax levy that got passed in the prior years, and that revenue being fully realized in 2021, as well as additional federal and state grant reimbursements that came through in 2021. From the expense side, there's a pretty significant fluctuation in fringe benefits. You'll probably see that every year. I'm sure you've all talked about and heard a lot about the new, not new anymore, but the pension and OPEB reporting requirements that came about, I think about 8 years ago now. So Laketran has to report a net pension liability and net OPEB liability related to participation in the Ohio Public Employees Retirement System. So every year, the financial numbers that have to get reported on Laketran's financial statements, that all comes down from OPERS itself. So there's changes in that liability that run through the expenses every year. So for the 2021 period, there was a significant drop in fringe benefits related to those adjustments that are required as part of those GASB standards. So you'll actually see that there's a credit for fringe benefits of a negative value, I should say, for fringe benefits of a little bit over $1 million. And that's because of the significant adjustments that are required as part of those GASB standards. So it's actually not something that operationally on the day-to-day that's impacting Laketran. Laketran just has to make their regular employer contributions for the retirement system. But for financial statement reporting purposes, we've pretty frequently every year seen that there's going to be significant fluctuations in those liabilities and the related expenses for that. So overall, that's the main change in expenses there. Other expenses fluctuated a little bit, but nothing too significantly year to year. Also, for a cash flows perspective, the Laketran had more investment type activity in this year. So when you look at the financial statements, you'll see that there's an increase in investments as the cash on hand, the management was able to take advantage of being able to get some extra investments on the books. But again, overall, the overall net position of Laketran increased largely again due to the new funding from COVID-19, the income tax revenue, those changes in those pension and OPEB liabilities that I discussed. So your overall net position from 2020 to 2021 increased by over almost $34 million. So from an operational standpoint, everything is looking good there. So that's pretty much all I was going to cover as far as the financial statements. I guess if anyone happens to have any questions, I'd be happy to answer that, whether it's about our audit procedures or anything in the financial statements themselves that I'd be able to answer.
Were there any questions at this time? I'm not seeing any. Thank you
Okay.
so much. We appreciate
Yeah,
it.
thank you. I just want to also express our appreciation for Lisa's efforts, as well as all the staff here that we've worked with through the course of the audit, because it's always great to have a client that is providing information timely and getting to our requests and working with us. So we definitely appreciate Lisa's efforts, as well as everyone else in the finance department that we work with, as well as everyone here on the staff that we interact with. So do thank you for that, and thanks for your time.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there a motion to enter into executive session to consider the appointment, employment, dismissal, discipline, promotion, demotion, or compensation of a public employee or official pursuant to section 121.22 G1 of the Ohio Revised Code?
So moved.
Motion made by Ms. McNamee. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Nunley. Trudy, if you could please call the roll.
Epic,
Yes.
McNamee, Nunley,
Yes.
Pismo. Yes. Sheets.
Yes.
Stinger.
Yes.
Stanger. Swanson.
Yes.
Zibble.
Yes.
Please let the record reflect the board will be going into executive session at 4:25 PM, and we will invite our legal counsel to stay as well. Okay, our meeting is back on YouTube. Ben, Lisa, was there any more discussion about the CAFR and the financial statements?
No, I just wanted to state that it is on the Govenda. We didn't put it in the packet because it's a large document. And I know in the past we have done that before. So, and I did highlight it in red on the briefing paper, just to highlight that for the single audit and the CAFR. So,
Okay.
and then as far as do you want me to go over the financials then or no? for July?
Next. So that's the next thing.
That's next.
Before we do this real quick, I'll just say, I know they went over it pretty quick, but I think it's important that, sometimes here we lose track of the fact that we get clean audits like we do every year. And I think this is our 26th year?
25th is what I thought was on the.
This is our 25th year of being in that top 3 to 5% in the state. So, we almost think of it as an expectation now, which it certainly is, but we are in the top 3 to 5% of government entities in the state for our financial tracking and financial management. So I think that's important for just the board to recognize, when the state comes here, they don't do that for a lot of people. And so that really speaks to the credit of Lisa and her team and Andrea about keeping all those dollars, how they're supposed to be. So I think that's important to mention.
Thank you very much. At this time, is our motion to accept Laketran's 2021 audited financial statements and CAFR as prepared by Zupka and Associates?
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Swanson, seconded by Ms. McNamee. Trudy, can you please call the roll?
Epic,
Yes.
McNamee, Nunley.
Yes.
Pismo.
Yes.
Sheets,
Yes.
Stanger,
Yes.
Swanson,
Yes.
Zibble.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. Lisa, I'll turn it back over to you for the June and July financial statements.
Yes, since we didn't have a board meeting in August, I do the financials each month, so I put both of them in there. I'm not gonna go through both. I'll just go through July real briefly, just to update, because it's the year to date. So, there's nothing really out of the ordinary, that has happened at all so far this year. So, pretty much our net income, for July is at, almost $7.7 million. And, that's our net income. So our total revenues is at like 22.7 and our operating expenses are at about 11.2. And then you can kind of see on there the percentages. I percentaged it out and we're pretty much the same year to date compared to even 2021. So I know that we're fighting for time. So if everybody unless there's any in particular questions or you want me to go through this, I will. But there's really nothing that stands out. I will make one comment for next month, and that is all the grants that the auditor talked about in that regarding the COVID money, and that we will be making our final, that'll show up on our financial statements in August. That'll be like our last draw on that amount of revenue regarding all the operating income. So, but that we had that for this month, so everything's really equal. And nothing, sales tax is growing, just about, I think we're about 1.2%. And so there's just nothing really out of the ordinary. Unless you want me to go through more, I will.
I think we're good.
Okay.
Thank you very much,
You're
Lisa.
welcome.
Is there a motion to approve the June 2022 operating and STS financial statements subject to audit and capital plan review?
So moved.
Motion made by Ms. Donnelly. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Stenger. Trudy, if you could please call the roll.
Epic,
Yes.
McNamee, Nunley, Pismo.
Yes.
Sheets.
Yes.
Stanger,
Yes.
Swanson,
Yes.
Zibble.
Yes.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the July 2022 operating and STS financial statements subject to audit and capital plan review?
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Zibble. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Epic. Trudy, if you could please call the roll.
Epic,
Yes.
Nunley.
Yes.
Pismo. Yes. Sheets,
No.
Stanger,
Yes.
Swanson,
Yes.
Zibble.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, everyone. At this time, I'm going to turn the meeting over to Mr. Capel for a discussion / presentation on the OR with CT Consultants.
All right, this is the sort of final action in regard to the owner's rep. So as the board will remember, the board assigned the Special Projects Committee to review the building project. Their recommendation was to hire an owner's rep. And so we started the procurement process on July 18th. The Brooks Act is a piece of federal regulation that specifically spells out how we hire this type of person. We went through that process. We received 7 proposals. The Special Projects Committee, which I just have to, thank Gary, Lane, Donna, and Chuck for their work on this. They reviewed all of those documents, so they spent time reading all 7 proposals. Once they completed reading them, they scored them. This is the scoring list. So they, as they read them, they ranked them in these ways, and these are the aggregates of those scores. The committee then interviewed the top 3 firms. So those top 3 firms were CT Consultants, NV5, and QCI. So we invited those firms in for interviews. The committee sat for several hours with each firm and went over their qualifications, previous projects, and spent a lot of time talking to them and asking them questions about their capabilities and so forth. At the conclusion of those interviews, the committee then scored that process. At the conclusion of the interview process, CT Consultants had the highest score. So you can see all 3 firms did a good job. But at the end of the process, CT was given the highest scoring out of all of those. This is a lot of work. This procurement process is sort of onerous and takes a long time. And so the committee spent a good amount of time going through this process to select the final owner's rep in this process. So on their last day after those interviews, the committee was in session and formally voted to recommend the hiring of CT Consultants to Laketran, Laketran Board of Trustees, excuse me. All 4 committee members were in unanimous agreement with that. And so with that recommendation made, me and my team entered some discussions with CT about cost. So the way that Brooks Act procurement works is you have to go through the process to select the firm first. You then enter negotiations with them about price. So we went through that whole process. The committee ranked the top firm, and then we entered the conversation about price. So we went back and forth with CT Consultants quite a bit on the different pricing proposals and different pricing structures, and sort of a lot of different options. They recommended to us that if we were going to hire them, that we hire them for 30 hours a week. So if we all remember, the purpose of an owner's rep in our case is to do 2 things. It's 1, to really review the plans that Bowen has created, and 2 is to manage and monitor the construction process. So when I talk about 30 hours a week, that means the average amount of hours they would spend on site during the project. They recommended 30 because there's going to be sort of ebbs and flows in construction. Some weeks they might be here for 40 hours a week, other they might be here for 20. So their recommendation, which after a lot of discussion we agree with, is for 30 hours a week. So we hit them particularly hard in the negotiating process on that dollar amount. So I know some of you had questions about why the dollars have a different sort of variations apart from them. So why is it 610 is only $90,000 away from 699, and then why is 839 $140,000 away from 699? That's because their original price for 30 hours a week was about $40,000 more than that. We really worked them as hard as we could to get that price down. So we got it down, I'm happy to say, below $700,000. So basically, when the board was talking about it as a group, the board said, between 1% and 4% is what we're willing to spend as part of the process. So that's why we have the percent of construction budget shown in the screen there. So it's 3.2% if we award the 30 hours a week. I did show all 3 of these on purpose because, I wanted the board to see those, because you, in theory, today could select a different number than that. If you said, hey, we really don't think we need that much oversight, let's try for 20 hours a week. Or you could also say, hey, we want them here, full time. We want that person in the building the entire time of the project So you could go with 40 hours a week. I don't think that that's completely necessary. I think 30 is kind of the sweet spot, but I wanted the board to be able to see that and potentially choose it if they wanted to. This is what's called we fashioned this with CT as what's called a lump sum contract. So what that means is this is the price. It doesn't change. This price includes the review of the plans, all their administrative work, their time on site, et cetera. There's no, we're going to get hit with a larger bill later. There's nothing like that. This is the price. End of story. There are options to do it different ways. We thought this was best because we didn't want to have to constantly monitor exactly to the minute the number of hours they use. You know, if he needs to come here at 6 a.m. for a concrete pour, do I want to have a staff member here making sure the owner's rep is here at that time? So a fixed sum contract is much easier to manage. In the event they exceeded their allotted hours, then we could come back to the board. They could explain why they need more time. The board could consider giving them more time if that happened. I think that's unlikely, but another reason we picked that 30 hours a week is you can always ask for more time, but if you commit to 40 hours a week and they don't need it, we've just kind of wasted it. So that is kind of the overview of it. I think this is a good outcome. You know, this is a lot of effort and a lot of time was spent. So just want to thank the committee again. I know this took a lot of effort. So I don't know if anybody has any questions about the process or anything like that, but this is sort of where we landed. I don't know if Gary, if you have anything to add that I missed.
No, other than one thing that's come up in various discussions that I think we probably missed in our early discussions, and that would be that the contract to move forward with OR ought to be, there ought to be language in it that says it's contingent upon the agreement to move forward with the whole building project. You know, we don't want to tie ourselves into $699,000 if for some reason the building project was postponed or didn't go forward. So there, it really ought to have a contingency value to it. Anyway, that's some of the feedback I've gotten.
Is there any expectation? That it won't go forward at this point?
Well, I think before we answer your question, I think Ben should respond to Gary's open question on the floor.
Okay. I think that that's absolutely something we could work into the contract. I think you'd have to have sort of a two-part one where we agree to pay them to do the plan review, because that would start essentially immediately, but then the actual owner's rep on-site supervision could be contingent upon a motion to move forward.
You're absolutely right, and I should have said that myself. So thank you. I appreciate that.
I agree.
Your question was?
If you have heard anything, if there's been any internal discussion about the contractor, I should say the building project not going forward.
I think it's fair to say that it has been a topic that's led to a lot of discussion.
So after a year's worth of committee work, we could still junk this whole thing?
Donna, that's going to come down to a vote at a later date. I can't speak for every board member here.
Respectfully, that would be the most asinine thing I've ever seen any iteration of the Board of Trustees do in all my years of service, if that would happen.
Other discussion about the agreement with CT and the OR. Mr. Sheets.
Mr. Dines, you've had a lot of experience, you've told me, with owners reps and other projects. Does this look pretty much like what an owner's rep contract would look like,
Well,
in your opinion?
Yeah, at this point, I'd equate this similar to what we have in front of us as a letter of intent. And so
Okay.
we're then going to negotiate the terms of the contract with CT.
Okay.
So this is has been kind of noted, this is the preliminary stage of that indication of what the expectations are. And then we'll enter into a definitive agreement at a point later. And at that point, then we can address Mr. Swanson's concerns and any other board concerns with language that provides Laketran appropriate abilities to either, exit the contract, terminate the contract for whatever reason.
One of the reasons that I was so in favor of CT is because they've been involved from the get-go, even originally giving us a proposal. I'm surprised about the amount of money they want to look at the plans and look at, the construction that's going along. 1 to 4%, it looks like everybody's always going to go for the almost 3% at a big deal, 2.79. Looks like it's $99,000 or $90,000 for every 10 hours. I think this is an outlandish amount of money for what they're already familiar with and should be able to go in there and do a pretty doggone good job for probably half that at most. I don't like that size of that number. End of story. I didn't say we don't need an owner's rep. I'm just not really happy with the quoted number of hours. And, seems outlandish.
What's the length of the contract then? Is it 2 years?
It's approximately 2 years.
So you got 100 weeks worth of construction that's going to have to cover.
They don't have to be here every week. We don't know yet. I know.
I would say that you're going to, the 30 hours a week is a very valued number to have on this. And they will be here probably on the average 30 hours a week. If you have it at the beginning when they're doing a lot of underground work, it'll be lighter at the end.
Think it's going to save us $700,000?
Said that.
I know.
Could save you $700,000 worth of aggravation.
No comment.
Well, I have to jump in there then. The offset to this was if we didn't get an owner's rep, and I thought we were all pretty comfortable with that agreement, because in the absence of the owner rep, who runs this construction project for us? Do we expect management to do that? Are we going to do it? Are we going to get some guy off the street to come in and do it, or some gal? Pardon my French. To me, I thought we all agreed pretty precisely that the role of an owner's rep was the precise role that we needed in this case, because it was too much to ask of management to do their day-to-day function and become building experts on a complex project, which we all agreed was pretty complex when you start to talk about moving offices and moving people around while you're doing the construction. So I thought we put that to bed.
Yes, Ms. McNamee.
And I would like to add a reminder. When we were having those discussions, we discussed a range to consider for the owner's rep. And that range was $750,000 to $1 million. I was very pleased with these numbers where they fell, considering what we're getting for it, as Mr. Zibble just described.
Any other comments, discussions?
So Ben, the 699,000, that's a fixed amount then, right? That cannot be adjusted once the contract is signed. Is that correct? Even if they don't need the full 30 hours?
That is correct.
Okay.
I mean, I would say if we saw a trend in them being here 20 hours a week, we would have a conversation with them and seek a reduction in the contract. But I would say that's unlikely. But we're going to be monitoring the process. So
Would there possibly be language in the contract that, gives us that opportunity?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll make sure there are our standard process to have several different kinds of protection in the contract. And that is one of them, that the price could change if for some reason the project changed in some substantial way, then we could also go back to the table and discuss the dollars. Not included in this slide is a much more detailed layout of their time estimate.
Yeah.
And so if we notice that time estimate having to be adjusted, we would come to them and say, hey, look, you're not needing this. We're going to cut you here.
Okay.
The way this actually is awarded is this is a not to exceed number. So
Right.
that means this is the most we could spend, but we could spend less. And that when we bring things to the board, that's how things are worded. And
Right.
we frequently do spend less and try. So yes.
I thought you said it was a lump sum, though.
That-
So
yeah, that-
doesn't mean
was-
it's a
It
flat
is.
was my
fee.
question.
It is. Well, but with, yeah. So I'm sorry. That was my miscommunication.
So wait, I'm confused. So I thought it was.
Ignore the thing I just said.
Me too.
So it's a flat fee, whether they are actually here 20 hours or 40 hours, it's $699,000.
Yes.
And then, okay. But they could come to, so if, I think what Bill was saying is that if they're only here 20 hours, are we going to get any sort of credit? Because you said they could come to us and ask for more money in theory if they're really here 40
Yes.
hours.
We would get a credit if their hourly rate or if their hourly usage was less than what we anticipated, we would get a credit for them.
I thought you just said we wouldn't.
We would. It's you, as the project goes, you renegotiate things if you see changes. So you start off with essentially a lump sum, which is this $699. But as the project moves along, if you need to make a change, there is language in the contract that lets you go back and make an adjustment. The main thing is you can format it hourly, where you have to pay them for every hour they're on site. You essentially have to have a timekeeping software for them so they monitor all the time they work versus giving them an average number of hours per week to work.
Okay.
They were hired at 30 and only did 20 consistently. I would wonder what they were overlooking.
It's likely in this case, they're going to go over an average of 30 versus under. But you don't really know. So it's an excellent question, Bill, that, what happens, especially towards the end of the contract, when you see the hours they're working, how are those lining up with the contract?
Okay. Thank you.
I'm still confused because I just went back and looked at the motion, the legal language of the motion that we're approving, and it says a cost not to exceed. So that would contradict what your lump sum.
So no, because what you are doing as a board is you're authorizing me to go negotiate with CT. And so you are authorizing me to negotiate the contract with CT at a price not to exceed $699,000. So then when I negotiate the contract with them, it will be a lump sum contract for that total amount. So there's kind of two things happening.
Okay.
There's the board's action and then the actual contract. So that's why that's a little kind of
Okay.
confusing. Sorry if I didn't explain that very well.
Thank you.
And just to give some context, Kim, if I understand the process correctly, you negotiate the agreement, then after you have an agreement, you send it to Mr. Dines, who reviews the legalese with their attorney, and then you go back and forth. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, I would say the negotiation with the vendor is it's almost more of a partnership between Brandon and I than it is anything else. We got the price to this point with Bridie from his firm, and then we go forward together and make sure that the management needs and the legal needs are met. And then both Brandon and I have a rule that any contract we do has Brandon's signature to form on it, and then I sign it. So yes, both of those needs are met.
Okay. Any other discussion items for this agreement?
Yeah, will we have an opportunity to vote on that contract before it's signed? Or if we vote today, that means you go forward and they've got the authority to sign the contract as long as it doesn't exceed $699,000.
The second.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? So, Mr. Dines, for the purposes of the resolution, do we need to include any language to either incorporate Bill's comments or Gary's?
What I would say, Mr. Chairman, it might be appropriate to revise it to read motion to approve resolution 2022-016 authorizing CEO and or his designee to enter into negotiations pursuant to a contract with CT Consultants for owner's representation services at a cost not to exceed. And then I think ultimately after that occurs, then later, at a later point in time, we will finalize and execute the contract. If that's what you're asking.
Who will finalize and authorize the contract?
Well, after we're authorizing him to negotiate with them and determine where we're going to be on that. And then after that negotiation is done with Ben and I and CT, then we would come back and I would suggest at that time the board would resolve to go ahead and enter into that contract once it's been.
So you eliminated some words out of the.
Yeah, I think from what I'm hearing, I think it'd be best that the board would prefer to have another step involved. And right now, the board would authorize the negotiation of those terms, and then we would, subsequent to that, execute it if that's what's desired, if that's what you were asking. If I've misinterpreted something, then forgive me.
So you're saying to change the motion to enter into negotiations for a potential contact with CT instead of enter and execute the contract for CT?
Yeah, and again, if the board prefers otherwise, it's up to the board. I'm just suggesting from what I heard from Ms. Stenger and otherwise, if that's where the board stands now, they prefer to authorize negotiations and then at a subsequent point to execute the contract, that's fine. Or if the board prefers to execute as is with the language as presented, then the board can do that.
I'd like to open that up for discussion.
I'd just like to make the comment, I think he's already negotiated the cost on this and has negotiated the scope. It's really just now getting into the form of the contract, which he's indicated that it's going to be a lump sum type contract. So I don't understand why we wouldn't just go ahead and take care of that. I understand a couple of questions about cutting it off or canceling the contract. I understand that. And that's something you could work into the language. It says, here's part one or phase one, which is going to be the review of the contract. And then to go on from there, then we have to go forward with the project. So I'm not so sure I understand why we would have to delay another month to bring back that final contract for authorization.
I don't understand it either because that's not how Laketran has traditionally done their contracts.
Well, again, as I stated, this isn't my decision. This is up, I was simply making a suggestion pursuant to what I heard from board members. This is up to all of you to discuss and determine how you wish to handle this. As far as my role in this, I'm going to do what I'm going to do either way. It's up to you how you want to handle that. I was just.
Yeah, Chuck, isn't putting this in there as far as what you just suggested or what we want more in there, isn't that part of it? That's a negotiating. What if they don't want to do that?
There's no
Then he can't come into an agreement with them and then we would have to move on to the next person.
Well, that's why it's called continuing negotiations.
But I'm sure that they have broken down. They should have broken down. Here's what we're going to spend up front, and here's what we're going to have to do during the construction.
Well, we need to get that understanding then. It's not just $30 an hour for divided into $700,000. That's not the case.
If you wanted more of a breakdown of it, then Ben's going to have to come in and make another presentation of all the breakdown of how the negotiations went.
Well, so be it.
I know I'm not a board member. If I could jump in to maybe have some clarification. The CT gave us a breakdown of all the fees in a spreadsheet, which the committee received from me a week before the meeting. I think what I'm hearing is you could have the resolution worded as it is, but add to it with the specific instructions, to have a two-part or a two-phase contract, which phase one is plan review, phase two is the owner's rep review, and give that authority today. And then add to that resolution with the proper protections as requested from Mr. Epic. You could put all that in today's resolution, which would sort of protect your fears and interests, but also let the process continue at the same speed. You don't have to, just that's something you have the option to do.
think with the amount of work that the special committee has done and brought back to us, that we move forward with giving the option to allow you to go into contract with CT with the not to exceed number. And now it's on you to negotiate that number of what it is. And hopefully you'll get it better, but we can move from there. So that's my takeaway from where we move forward on this.
So you are in favor of leaving the motion as is?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going,
Without that lump sum phrase, doing it as the not to exceed. I don't think that was in there, but I know we talked about it. I just want to make sure that was clear.
okay, is there any more discussion? Is there a motion to approve the resolution 2022-016 authorizing the CEO or his designee to enter into and execute a contract with CT Consultants for owners representation services at a cost not to exceed $699,000? And we would be also requesting the language for a phase 1 and phase 2, which was the plan review phase. Those be separated out. And then some of the protections requested by board member Epic. Is there a motion? Motion made by Ms. McNamee. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Swanson. Trudy, can you please call the roll?
Epic,
Yes.
McNamee. Nunley.
Yes.
Pismo. Yes. Sheets,
Yes.
Stanger,
Yes.
Swanson,
Yes.
Zibble.
No.
Okay, thank you, everyone. The motion has passed. At this time, I'll turn the meeting over to our new HR representative, Emily, to discuss the Laketran pay grade tables.
I'm gonna steal the mic for a second. Just to introduce everybody to Emily. I don't know if anyone has met. This is her first meeting. Emily is our new director of HR. She replaced Mike Austin. And so she is coming into this, without all the lead up to this particular action item. So I'm gonna just kind of give her a little layup. This is the action item I've been talking about for months about the pay tables. This does not, I just want to say it again, this does not change or affect anyone's pay. This is more of an administrative process to make sure the proper grades exist. So I'm going to throw her then into the deep end of the pool now and let her give the presentation, and I'll be here for backup.
Thank you, Ben. So if I'm telling you anything that you already know, I apologize, but I want to make sure that we're level setting and all on the same page. So as you know, our bylaws require that the organization have an org chart. And for each position, they are on the org chart, and each position on the org chart has a pay grade assigned to it. And this is for level setting. This is routine. This is routine if you're not from an organization that has pay grades. This is routine mostly in the public sector or in organizations that have union environments. So this is not unusual for us. This is routine. And the last time pay grades were updated for us was in 2017, and we want to update them every 5 years. So it's time. It's 2022, and we're looking to update our pay grades for the next 5 years, for 2022 to 2027. And to help us with that, we got contracted with the services of Evergreen Solutions, and they looked at 5 different data points to help us with that. They looked at our peers. They looked at CPI for current, which is the Consumer Price Index for current inflation rates. They looked at the BLS, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, for projected inflation rates. They looked at published salary information for government organizations, and they also looked at the clients that they are working with and their known trajectories for where they're going with salaries. And this again is common compensation strategies when you're looking to make adjustments for compensation. So as you look at the table, you can see where we've been for our pay grades for 2017 and where we would like to go for the next 5 years for 2022 to 2027. I do want to point out that we don't use all of these grades. We don't use grade 1, the lowest. We also don't use the top 3 pay grades. And as Ben had mentioned, we're not looking to make any specific moves with anybody. This just helps us be competitive as we're moving into the future. So the way this works is, I'll use salary grade 7 as an example. We don't currently have somebody in grade 7, but you can see if we were to add a position that we're at grade 7, we're making adjustments from where we are in 2017 and having wiggle room as we're moving and looking into the future to make adjustments if we need to. So my recommendation is that the board approve these updates to our pay grade so that we can continue to be competitive in the employment market. So are there any questions? Because I'm very basic, very brief, and I want to be cognizant of everyone's time.
I have a question.
For sure.
Is it a typographical error on the chart where it says hourly max? All the other ones say salary.
Yeah, that is. Thank you. Thank you for pointing that out. Yes, that would be salary. That would be a really wonderful hourly rate. And,
Very nice.
And you guys would probably toss me out on my head if I said that was what we were paying folks on hourly. Thank you.
So just for point of clarity for everyone on the board. So these are the salary minimums and max.
Yes, correct.
Thank you.
So hypothetically, if I'm grade 7
Mhm.
and I'm relatively new and hired at grade 7,
Mhm.
assume that can happen. And my pay is 43,362.18.
Mhm.
And in 2022, we make an adjustment,
Mhm.
or 2023, we make an adjustment.
Mhm.
And I'm still at the minimum. Do I jump to 47,805 because the pay grades have now changed? Or do I remain at 43,362?
Sure. Hypothetically, that could happen. However, typically folks are not paid at the min. They typically fall somewhere within the pay grade.
But it's still the same question. Take the min point. If I'm at the min point at any one of these grades, and I'm going to get an increase in 2023 because it's time that I'm going to get an increase.
Right.
Do I jump to the midpoint of the same grade? So am I getting that right, or am I getting it wrong? I'm not sure I quite understand.
Hypothetically, that could happen, but remember, these are pay rates that are 5 years old. So that min was the min in 2017. So that's data that's 5 years old.
Yeah, but you still haven't answered my question.
So if the person is below the minimum and the minimum went up, they would be brought up to that minimum. We don't have any people in that particular scenario that's occurring to. If they're, say, in the middle of 7, they don't then go to the middle of 8. Their pay stays the same unless it hits one of the ends. So think of it like guardrails.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Thanks.
Kind of along those lines, it looks like in the last 10, pay grade 10 through 20, the new minimum is above the old maximum in all cases. Is that what's happened to our salaries in the last 5 years? They've gone way out of sight like that? That's pretty, wow, I'm glad I'm not running a company anymore. Sorry, Gary.
Ouch.
That is, to be completely honest, the previous information that we have, when my predecessor did these updates, it was done without a table. It was done 3% here and there, and it was not perfectly documented. We chose to put it in a table this time to make it more clear to the board and to staff. So that min and max issue, I had not noticed that before, but that is troubling. There must be.
Are we confident the data is correct here?
The new data, yes, I am very confident the new data is correct. The old data, we did our best to piece it together from a number of sources. And that's also why we have it in this chart like this. Essentially what he did, every year he increased the pay grades. We said that's a bad practice. It should happen every 5 years. The wages should live within those. There was conflicting information from the past. So I'm very confident in the new numbers. There's nobody out of whack in the new numbers. The old ones, there's got to be a math issue in there somewhere, which I'm not super thrilled that we're looking at that right now.
And what's the ramification of this being tabled until we know the data is accurate?
There is one employee that is, so our raises take place October 1st. There is one employee in the maintenance department that is at the top of his grade, who his raise does not, he would only receive part of it because he would be truncated by the top grade. He's the assistant director of maintenance. And so that's the only person that would be negatively impacted. And I could probably just explain it to him that we can't. Yeah, that's an issue. This looks like almost an Excel issue that when we cut and pasted it, it translated wrong.
Well,
Well,
my
I-
concern is that with the new grades, everyone is going to be getting a 20 to 30% raise.
No, there's nobody, nobody's, well, the way this, I think we need to table this and I need to go back. This chart is not right. So
Okay.
there is, I'll say again, there is no one is getting a raise out of this process. No one, this is not changing anyone's actual paycheck. Everyone's pay is staying the same as it is now. This is just the guardrails they live within.
But for me, Ben, I understand what you're saying. Not to be argumentative, but it's not where they're at today. It's where they're gonna, where are we committing to go on the next round of raises? And that's not to say that people aren't deserving of raises. You know, it's just, it's a question of what are they gonna be? What are we committing to?
Yeah, the most people fall in the middle of the right side already. So they're in the middle of that 2022 to 2027 chart. So it's there, you know, the list is here, they're in the middle, the list is just moving a little bit with time. So they're still living within it. So there's not, this doesn't commit the board to any future salary actions. This doesn't commit the board to any pay changes whatsoever at all. This is just an administrative process to make sure those grades are correct. And, you know, when we were putting all the pieces together to bring this to you today, I was unhappy with the documentation we had in the past from it, and we did our best, but there's some kind of Excel issue that didn't translate properly in this document. So we need to go back and review that.
Ben, along Gary's original question, how many people do we have between grade 10 and grade 17 if we don't do the last 18, 19, and 20?
So
They all fall into that same category, that their minimum is above what the maximum is today.
Well, it's not. There's an error in this chart.
Well, then let's fix the chart and not do any voting on this until we get it fixed.
Yes, that's what we need to do.
Let's move on then.
I apologize for that.
Thank you, Lane.
That is not Emily's fault. That is,
I didn't
Mike
say it was anybody's
Mike
fault.
was doing this as he left, and clearly some things got missed. So
even-
I apologize to the board for that.
Even the skies are saying, get on.
Okay, we have tabled this for next month where we will have a redo of this. And it looks like I'm going to turn the meeting over to Matt at this time.
Thank you, Grant. I'll try to talk over the rain here. All
Mr. Chair,
right.
Real briefly, let's just take a motion on that if you don't mind, and a roll call to table it, just to be clear for the record.
Sure. At this time, is there a motion to table the pay grade table discussion?
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Zibble. Is there a second?
Second,
Second by Ms. Stanger. Trudy, if you could please call the roll.
Epic,
Yes.
McNamee. Nunley.
Yes.
Pismo. Yes. Sheets.
Yes.
Stanger,
yes.
Swanson,
Yes.
Zibble.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. And at this time, I will now turn the meeting over to Matt.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. There we are. So I'll do a little bit of background into the Breckenridge Village contract.
Increased talking volume.
Thank you. Can you hear me now? Okay. So I'll do a little bit of background into the Breckenridge Village contract. So Breckenridge Village is a nonprofit life plan community. So it allows residents to age in place at varying levels of care on their campus. There are 780 residents and 86 buildings on that campus, actually. I was surprised to learn that. Currently, the service is provided in two different ways. They do a shared ride circular, which basically is kind of like a fixed route that goes around the campus at certain times and takes people shopping or to drugstores, banks, the mall, etc. And then there is a dial-a-ride service that they do to just neighboring cities and select points into Cuyahoga County twice a week. Thank you. So I'll be brief about this since this is all in the briefing paper here. Why do we contract a service? You know, there's some information there about the history of it, but this contractual relationship allows Laketran and Breckenridge to split the cost to provide this customized dial-a-ride service and for its significant senior population. So that helps save Laketran money and it creates more room on dial-a-ride to serve other passengers. Go ahead. So here's some history savings from the last few years here. 2020, there was a pretty significant drop in ridership. We could all take a guess why, COVID. So it has a history of saving Laketran money. So we can go on here. For the 23, 24, and 25, this is a not to exceed cost for each of those years. Now, the estimated number of riders is 14,400 for each of those years. They have gone over that number in the past and it remains at the do not exceed number. So for example, in 2018, I believe that they were at 19,000 trips and we paid our do not exceed number. We also, if they don't meet that number of trips, we don't pay for the do not exceed number. We don't pay up to that do not exceed number. Does that make sense? We only pay for the trips that were performed. So obviously in 2020, since there were only 7,000 trips performed, we paid for 7,000 trips. Any questions? Okay. Thank you.
Any discussion or questions? Is there a motion to approve resolution 2022-018 authorizing the CEO or his designee to enter into a contract with Ohio Living Breckenridge Village for supplemental paratransit service?
So moved.
Motion made by Ms. McNamee. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Swanson. Trudy, if you could please call the roll.
Epic,
Yes.
Actemy.
Yes.
Nunley.
Yes.
Pismo.
Yes.
Sheets.
Yes.
Stanger.
Yes.
Swanson.
Yes.
Zibble.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, everyone. And at this time, I'm going to turn the meeting over to Tony.
Thank you. I'm looking this evening to ask the board for the second renewal for the third and final year of the contract with Cornerstone IT for support services here at Laketran. A little bit of history for the board members that weren't here for the initial one. Cornerstone IT has a long-standing service with Laketran, going from a programmer to an MSP to basically Laketran's IT department before I started with Laketran in February of 2020. So that's where we stand with them. Next. Where we are with them right now is they are an assistant to me, providing additional support as needed for desktop services here at the agency, and cover part of our the server maintenance of this. When we talked about the disaster recovery plan earlier with the audit, they are a key part of the disaster recovery plan here at Laketran in the event of a failure. Next. What I'm asking for this evening is to extend the current contract through September of 2023. There was a 3% increase in services, taking us now to $38.20 per month. And then there is the backup and data protection portion, which has not changed during the extent of the contract. That's locked at $11.50 a month. We will continue to evaluate the performance, which has improved greatly with the latest round of people that they have brought on board, that the level of service and the timeliness of service has improved dramatically during these last 12 months of service with them, to the point where I think they're doing a very good job in helping us. Next. Oh, that's it. Okay. All right. So with that being said, I'm asking the board for their approval on taking us into year 3 for the IT support services. That will be $45,840, and then the disaster recovery portion for a cost of $13,000, not to exceed $13,800 annually. Any questions?
Yes. Ben told me that you asked for additional help from them, and they said that they didn't have any more people or don't have any more capacity. Is that true?
We did ask for some one-time help.
Yeah, we asked for some one-time help, and they did provide me a one-time person, yes.
Tell me what Ben's exact words were. They told him that they didn't have additional clientele or personnel to give you any help.
That they didn't tell me they didn't have any people to do it. We had a conversation. I had a conversation with Ray Paganini about if an extra person hired through him would be a good plan, and he said no. He did not recommend that to us because it was not a good financial decision. But as far as additional hours of service, the amount we have is fixed in the contract. So we've asked for some one-time help above and beyond that a couple times for some small projects. But as far as a total amount of extra help, we haven't asked for that specific thing.
Well, that wasn't what I understood when we had that conversation. Do they have any extra people if we needed to get more help?
If we needed more help, yes, they could provide additional staff if we needed it.
It is my understanding that Ray recently sold his business. It was acquired by a larger business, I think out of Wisconsin, if I remember right.
It's based out of Maine. It's called
Maine.
Logically.
Maine, sorry. And they have committed to putting whatever resources in that Ray can support. So I would assume that if you're relatively happy now, it should get better. Would that be a safe thing to say, do you think?
I mean, without knowing the track record that Logically has, I mean, they have not changed anything about Cornerstone yet. They're just starting to go through the rebranding efforts. Matter of fact, this morning they just instituted their new help desk software. So that didn't go as smoothly as everybody thought. I mean, you're merging 2 large IT companies. So I'll refrain from commenting until we get a little further down the road to see what the level of service, if it maintains at this level. Because I mean, right now we are one of Cornerstone IT's VIP customers. I mean, if I call, we go to the top of the queue.
And you're relatively, taking my earlier comment apart, just ignoring that, as it stands right now, you're relatively satisfied with the level you're getting now currently.
I'm happy with the level of service I'm getting. If I could contract for more hours to get a little bit more help, I would not say no to that, but the quality of the people that they're sending me to work on these projects and tasks has increased. The quality has increased dramatically in the past 12-month period.
That's good to hear.
Yeah.
So just the broader picture is this was a 3-year contract. This is the last year in that 3-year agreement. So before September of 2023, we'll need to go through a bid process to, assuming we retain the managed service provider contract model, we need to go back out to bid for a contract again. So our schedule was this kind of dovetails in with the IT strategic plan we've been working on. So in theory, that plan will give us, what the structure should be in the future at the appropriate time to go out to bid if we want to make a change.
Any other questions, comments, or discussion? Is there a motion to approve Resolution 2022-019, authorizing the CEO or his designee to exercise Laketran's option to extend the agreement with Cornerstone for managed information technology services for a one-year renewal term pursuant to the original agreement entered into and executed on or about October 1st, 2020?
So moved.
Motion made by Ms. Stenger. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Swanson. Trudy, if you could please call the roll.
Epic,
Yes.
McNamee,
Yes.
Nunley,
Yes.
Pismo,
Yes.
Sheets,
Yes.
Stanger,
Yes.
Swanson,
Yes.
Zibble.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. It looks like the next item on our agenda is the organizational chart.
Yes, so this item is a result of the vote the board took in July, which was to increase service in 2023. So as a result of that, we need to increase the org chart to add 7 additional full-time drivers. So just a reminder, the infrastructure bill that was passed in 2021 is bringing some additional funds to Laketran. The board had a presentation in June about what we wanted to do with those funds. The board ultimately voted in July to expand services in 2023. As a result of those actions, we need to add some more full-time drivers to the org chart, which is a total of 7. And so this is all just a recap of what we're doing. We're adding some service in the morning and in the night during the week, and then adding some service on Saturday. And so this is the org chart as proposed. The only change in here is changing the number of full-time drivers from 103 to 110. And this is the schedule we're on for the project. So, my little green checks are things we have accomplished. So right now we are at the September approval of the additional full-time positions in the org chart. With that approved, we'll start the hiring process and all the internal work that takes place to get that service started in 2023. So we are on schedule and moving along as expected.
Just to clarify, that says 4 additional. The resolution
I'm not
says
doing great.
7.
I'm not doing great with typos tonight, am I? I apologize. It is 7. The dollars are 7. It is 7. I'm sorry that says 4.
Does that additional money come every year then?
It comes every year for 5 years.
5 years,
Yeah.
okay.
Usually what happens with Congress is they say this is the thing for 5 years, then they can't agree for a while and they just extend it. So it's probably more like 5 to 7. You don't really know though. But 5
So are we
years.
going to hire these people for 5 years?
Well, there's enough attrition that in the event we know the money's going away.
Any questions or comments? Is there a motion to approve the resolution 2022-020 updated organizational chart to add 7 full-time drivers for additional service in 2023? Motion made by Ms. McNamee. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Nunley. Trudy, if you could please call the roll.
Epic,
Yes.
McNamee, Nunley,
Yes.
Pismo,
Yes.
Sheets,
Yes.
Stanger,
Yes.
Swanson,
Yes.
Zibble.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. We'll go back to Ben for the 6-month look ahead and the CEO report.
All right, 6-month look ahead. I will move as quick as I can. In October, we will bring a item to the board for fleet detailing. So right now we use Deepwood Industries Community Employment Services to do our fleet detailing. The contract is expiring. We need to go out to bid for a new 3-year contract. Same basic thing for janitorial services. We use Deepwood Industries Community Employment Services to clean our headquarters. The contract is expiring. We need to go out to bid to hire somebody for the next 3 years. We did get a lot of competition in the pre-bid process for this. So while we've had Deepwood for the last 3 years, that could easily change. We also have some clauses in their contract that should the headquarters construction project go forward, that we showed them what it could be, and they have pricing prepared in the event that were to happen. We ask for approval every year from the board for a renewal. So if the headquarters project is moving forward in your renewal, you would see that change. But right now it's for this building as it sits. We are moving along with the IT strategic plan. We would plan to bring that to the board in October for approval. We have an item that is new, which is a vehicle lift in Bay 5 of maintenance. So the current lift suffered a major failure and it's just not practical to fix it. It has failed a number of times and the repairs are very expensive on a 30-year-old piece of equipment. So it just doesn't make sense to try and do those repairs. It has to do with the rails that are in the concrete floor. So they have to jackhammer the floor out and do a whole bunch of work that just ultimately isn't worth it. So as Keith and his team were identifying what they wanted to do, right now it's an in-ground lift, which means most of the components are below ground. There's a hydraulic pump above ground and it lifts the buses in the air to do maintenance. When that was put in 30 years ago, it was state of the art. There were not as many options on the market. There are now more options. So Keith and his team have identified using an above ground lift, which will be cheaper to replace. It's easier for the mechanics to put the bus on and off of it. And it's a little more flexible for the smaller fleet that we are operating now. So as the dial ride buses have gotten smaller, those current lifts have actually made it harder to put them on the lift because they are designed for a 40-foot transit bus. So we are working on getting all the final estimates together, but to replace that lift, we are looking at a cost of roughly $80,000. That does include removing the old components, filling in the pit that they are in now, and installation of the new equipment on top of that. So we don't have all the pricing finalized yet. That's sort of our rough budget right now for something that we didn't kind of expect to happen, but having that lift out of service and maintenance is a pretty big deal for Keith. So that's why we have it on the agenda for next month.
Let's back up. This IT strategic plan, I don't even understand why we have it in here. I know you said you've mentioned it a few times in the last few months, but I don't know that all the board members understood what you were talking about. But I'd like to have that IT strategic plan RFQ removed and canceled because I don't see any reason that we want to spend $100,000 to have somebody come in and tell us that our IT is in good shape, because it is in good shape. I've not heard anybody complain about it. Cornerstone says things are going well. There's no reason to have somebody come in and tell us that the computer industry is going to be any different 5 years from now. It's not going to be. It's a very mature industry now. And the only thing you can do in the industry now is try and find a better price for your online services and your support. I don't see any change. Computers aren't going to change. This is a ridiculous, as far as I'm concerned, request for a strategic plan. If anything, it should be part of a overall strategic plan, one little part of it. I don't see spending $100,000 of the Lake County taxpayers' money on something this ridiculous.
So this is something we've been working on at a response from a conversation originally in February when we asked to add another employee to IT. The board was uncomfortable with that at the time and asked for a plan. So this was our attempt to produce that plan for the board. So if the board would like a different path charted, we're happy to do that. But things are going relatively well in IT. Cornerstone has been better lately, but overall we are in a situation where we're going to need to add resources in some way, and it could be an employee or through Cornerstone or some other means in the future. And so our intent with this plan was to lay that out for the board, but I am happy to make a change as the board would like.
I think there's people in Lake County we can hire to come in and take a look at what we're doing and make suggestions that wouldn't cost anywhere near $100,000. Matter of fact, there's some individuals I know that I would recommend for that. And if anybody if you want to go down that path, I could introduce you to people like that, but it's up to you. I just cannot see why we would want to spend $100,000 on a plan that we don't need, in my opinion. but it's only a 50-year opinion.
I guess I would be curious. The scope of work we put together for the strategic plan was to do a comprehensive review of our IT department in a, from an objective, high level, along with what things we could do to make adjustments or make efficiency improvements over the next, there's a tactical window of 2 years for immediate action and then a 5-year sort of lookout timeframe. We have gotten, the proposals are in, we have not completed the evaluation process. The prices have ranged, I think, on the low end from around $80,000 to the high end of 130. We could go back through the process with a budget ceiling that is different. I was doing my best to give the board a holistic view of our IT department, so we could inform decisions in the future based on that plan. I guess if we still want to review the IT department and its staffing resources, but that number is too high, I would want to kind of get some guidance from the board as to what number for a plan would be acceptable. But I'm happy to change what we're doing. This was just me trying to do my best based on the board's feedback.
I just think we need to get this project off the agenda. How do you cancel the project?
Yes.
Why we're suddenly talking about doing this when I do think that with Laketran's growth, and we're going to be doing a strategic plan overall for the organization, I think it's very necessary that we look at our IT department and staffing, what we're going to need, and so on.
I would just make the comment that strategic plans are for long-range planning of where you want to get to and where you want to be with it all. And you got to have something like that to shoot for. And part of the strategic planning process too is to look at what ifs. What if this happens? What if this goes wrong? What happens if the market totally changes and all that? And I think the possibility of changes in the staffing and that they need to have some type of a plan that keeps them on track, then to keep us to the same spot also into the future. And over the last year or so, we've been number of times we've asked, well, where are we going? Where are we going with different things? So I think strategic plans are important to have. Now, whether or not it's 100,000, that's up for him to come up with a scope and negotiate a fee on.
If I recall how this came up was we were at a meeting where we were talking about adding personnel to the IT department, and there was some concern over, do we need another person and where are we going with IT? And I think part of the takeaway was that Ben was going to develop with Tony a plan. And I think that's where the IT strategic plan was born from, because there was a little bit of consternation of, well, how big is the IT department going to be? Do we need Cornerstone versus another on-site person, or do we even need this on-site person? So my recollection is that's where the plan came from, was let's get a roadmap for where we're going with IT. Now, in terms of the dollar values associated with it, I have no recollection of saying this is $10,000 versus $1 million or anything.
Well, the numbers in the RFQ.
Now, there are numbers in an RFQ, and my understanding of the process is right now, like any procurement, they're just, the Laketran team put out an RFQ. They've gotten some bids back. There's no formal action being done until there's a proposal in front of us. Now, of course, though, you do have a right to make a motion to ask the agency to stop working on it, I believe.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, motion can be made anytime. I would recommend that would be something under new business when that's entertained.
So under new business, if you would like, you could make a motion to kibosh the IT strategic plan.
Can I use that word?
If you must.
Moving on, did anyone have any questions about the vehicle lift part? So that'll be, we expect to have that to the board next month. We're gonna make sure that it's what we want. It's possible that it could slip till November, but we're gonna try for October. In November, we have a presentation of the annual budget for 2023. We have an approval request for gasoline and diesel fuel. So for just a reminder that gasoline and diesel fuel is one of the procurements where we ask for permission before we have the price, because the price window we get in the procurement is very narrow. So this is a process we've used for the last quite a number of years. It has been consistently good for us to enter into this agreement. It is a cooperative purchasing agreement with Akron, PARTA, and some other transit systems. So it has continued to be financially beneficial for us. The way we have to ask for that permission is not how we always prefer to do it, but it's kind of the only way, because you have 24 hours to accept their price from when they tell you. We'll have an approval request for the bus stop at Demeter High School. So again, as a reminder, the school reached out to us for some improvements to their bus stop, and we have been working with Burgess and Nyepel to do the designs, and we'll be going out to bid here shortly. And so that will come to the board in November. On the schedule, as of right now, we have the request to bid the HQ project. Obviously, that schedule could change, but as the schedule is laid out, it would come before the board in December. That would be the board approving going to bid for the process. So wouldn't be any prices for the contractor at that time. In December, we'll request approval of the annual budget. And in December, we will bring before you the item to replace the street sweeper. So just a reminder, we have 2 street sweepers that are used to clean the garage. They're both purchased in 2007. One of them suffered significant failures at the end of 2021. We essentially have Franken machined these together. We've taken the parts from one to make one operating machine, but they no longer make parts for them. So it kind of is what it is. This is one of those things I always equate to, if your furnace fails, you have to fix it whether you want to or not. This is kind of one of those action items. I do believe we have received some grant money for one. So much of the roughly $80,000 estimated cost will be covered by grant money. We'll have an approval request for our uniform contract. Our current contract is still good time-wise, but the vendor has requested a 45% increase. Which we have denied, and they have said, we will only provide uniforms through this period of time. So we are going to have to go back out to bid. This is only for the driver uniforms. The mechanics uniforms are available off state contract, and it's not nearly as expensive. We will have a request for the annual meeting calendar. I know that seems silly, but we do have to officially approve the board's calendar for next year.
When we draft the calendar, can we have July be the month we skip a meeting instead of August?
Absolutely. I think that makes a lot more sense as
long as nobody objects to that. I think with school starting much earlier in the year, July makes a little more sense than August. Selfish reasons.
That should not be a problem. In January, we'll have the Title VI plan, which is a plan that FTA requires all transit systems to have and approved every 3 years. That is essentially the plan that guarantees we treat everyone equally. Assuming the schedule continues as the way we have it laid out, we would have a request to enter into contract with the low bidder for the HQ project. And then February and March are all quiet at the moment. I'm sure some things will show up to them, but they have not yet. Rolling right into my report, I mentioned the headquarters project. So this is the schedule as it stands today. Obviously, this can be modified, but we did the owner's rep procurement through July and September. The board has now approved the owner's rep contract. They will be doing their review during September and November. One of the things that they are tasked to do is provide a letter to the board to let them know whether or not the plans from Bowen are good, bad, mediocre, need changes, etc. So at some point, CT Consultants, I'm going to push them for October, should be here to give the board an overview of, hey, your plans are good, hey, your plans are bad, or whatever they bring to the board for a finding. Again, keeping with the schedule we've been talking about, the board would then approve, assuming the plans are acceptable, going to bid in November. The procurement would take place during December and January, and then we would award a contract in January. Geauga Transit Study is moving along. I've had quite a few phone calls with this lately. This has gotten to the point that I would like, that I've asked Trudy to reach out to all of you to schedule some one-on-one meetings just to talk about this. There's kind of a lot of information here that I don't think is, going through it at a board level. I'd like to have you able to ask some more one-on-one questions and have a discussion versus just a presentation. So expect an email from Trudy to reach out and set a meeting to talk about this project. I do have a meeting scheduled with the at the Geauga County Commissioner's Office on October 13th. I really don't have any role there. I've just been asked to be there to support the consultant showing their draft recommendations to the Geauga County Commissioners. Draft recommendations are not done yet. It's just been exceedingly difficult to schedule time with the Geauga County Commissioners. So they wanted to get it out there well ahead of time.
Can we as board members go to that?
I don't know the answer to that. I think it's a public meeting, so I would think the answer is yes, but I'll find
Okay,
out.
find out.
I'll email you. I'll email everybody. Oops, sorry. No, I'd like to do one-on-one meetings or phone calls or whatever board members would prefer to have kind of an open dialogue about what's going on. So it would be a one-on-one. Me and you. Lunch, dinner, whatever you'd like. The Lake Erie College contract has been completed with Brandon's help. We got that all done. So we are now working on all the details. So this is a draft of what the bus will look like. So it has some pretty Lake Erie branding on the back half with a little bit of Laketran branding on the front. So again, this service is slated to start in August of 2023. So we have lots of time, but we are working along that process. And so I'm very happy to say that everybody is happy with that. We are also working on some bus stop improvements on their campus. So sometime early next year, maybe March, maybe April, I'm not exactly sure yet, we'll bring an action item to the board for a little bit of construction for bus stop improvements on their campus. We just talked about the IT strategic plan. The only other piece of information I would say is we have been interviewing firms. We interviewed some last week. We do have one interview scheduled this week, which we may be changing. I'm happy to say vehicle storage ventilation is finally done. The fans were installed a little while ago. The controls are in place. The system is running. So the garage has adequate ventilation now after a long time. So very happy to say that is wrapped up and done with a bow on it. So if you want to go in the garage and breathe fresh air, you can. Collective bargaining, that normally would start we would probably start the process over the summer next year. The union's contract expires on September 30th of 2023. We are going to start the negotiation process a little bit earlier than normal this year. What that means for the board is that next month we will have some discussion in executive session about all the things that go into that, the process, and kind of what the board would like to see out of that. So when you see that on the agenda, that's why. Lastly, we had an interesting situation arise. So we got an email on August 26th from GFI, which is the company that manufactured our fare boxes. They have decided they are just discontinuing the sale and manufacture of the parts for our fare boxes. So normally, if we had not been diligent a long time ago, this would actually be a pretty big problem. A couple years ago, for those of you that were here, we used to have a fare box in every dial-a-ride bus. We removed it from the dial-a-ride buses and have gone to a prepayment situation. Just like if you book a flight, you pay for the service before you go. Same methodology for dial-a-ride. So we took all those fare boxes out of service. We kept them in the mezzanine for parts. So we are currently using those for parts. So we are not in danger by this parts shutdown. It does, though, give us a definite timeline on how long we can continue to use the fare boxes we have now. So we'll never be able to buy another part for them. We will only be able to operate off the parts that we have in stock. We have lots of parts. Keith is working on a schedule for how long we think we can go. It's going to be several years, probably like 5. So we're not in imminent danger of needing to do anything right away. But I want to make the board aware of it because fare boxes are really expensive. they're like $16,000 to $20,000 a piece. I have a strong dislike of them because they are such a maintenance headache for our maintenance department. So I would love long-term to see us not have fare boxes on the bus. It doesn't mean people wouldn't pay, but as a lot of you know, I've talked about mobile ticketing, which is where you use your phone to pay for something. We're all carrying around $1,000 computer in our pockets. We can leverage that to do the transaction versus have a machine. It does require us to do a study from FTA to evaluate if we can stop taking cash on the bus. So a lot of low income folks use cash, they rely on it. So we don't want to strand them without the ability to get our services. So we did apply for grants, and I'll show it in my next slide on the grant sheet. It does have some funds to do that study. It can be done. Dayton is doing it. So it is feasible to remove cash from the bus, but it's not something you can just kind of do. You have to really study it and put the right protections in place to ensure your customers can still access the bus. But I would love to never have to buy another fare box again. So we'd like to kind of wind down the parts we have in storage. And then when we finally run out, or hopefully a little bit before we run out, transition to not using fare boxes anymore. So that's kind of our long-term plan for this that we've been working towards, but it's propagated by just a hard no more parts.
Are they only in the local buses now?
Right now, they're in the commuter express buses and the local routes, and those are the only ones.
Computer Express is a little different. Locals are really the problem.
You're correct. Yes, the commuter express buses, most of those folks use their phone because it's so much easier.
Right.
So that really shouldn't be a hard one to get rid of, we hope. The local routes will be the challenge. You're exactly right.
I have an idea on that.
Sorry, what'd you say?
I said, I have an idea on that. I'll talk to you later.
Lastly is the grant spreadsheet. So we did get a bunch of awards in August. So we have received some funds on this list. There is one new application. So you can see we were awarded some funds, from ODOT. So we have money for some studies, money for I think the floor sweeper is in here somewhere. And the new one that we are applying for it's a routine one that we apply for every year. It's the second from the bottom. It is state fiscal year 2023, $5310. We apply for those through NOACA. Those are for replacement dial-a-ride buses. So nothing especially exciting there, but that's the new thing added to the list. The one thing this is a newer process. So I don't know if anybody has any feedback about when the board would like me to remove things from the list. I was kind of thinking after it's been on for 2 months after it's been awarded, I would take it off, but I also don't want to, not provide the information that everyone's looking for. So I may kind of provide send out an email for some feedback as we go. That wraps it up for my report.
Chairman, can I add one point to that? I know there was some concern with Lake Erie College agreement. I just want to let the board know that we did add language that upon the termination of that agreement, that Lake Erie College will pay a fee to return the bus to the Laketran colors, and that'll be removed at their cost. That was a point that I think was debated before. We just want to make everybody aware.
Thank you.
I don't know if your head reports.
Any other questions or comments for Ben? Is there any old business in the room? Is there any new business in the room?
Yes,
Mr. Sheets?
whatever the word he used before, the kibosh. I want to put the kibosh on this IT strategic study and stop it completely or cancel it, whatever you want to do.
So you would like to make a motion to end the procurement process for the IT strategic plan?
Yes,
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Mr. Swanson. Is there any discussion?
I already said what I wanted to say about it, so.
Okay. Any other discussion? So a yes vote would be to cancel the RFP for the IT strategic plan. A no vote would be to keep the process as is. So a yes means no and a no means yes.
Can you repeat that one more time?
A yes, a yes vote would cancel the IT strategic plan. A no vote would keep the RFP process moving forward. Trudy, could you please call the roll?
Epic,
No.
McNamee. Nunley,
Yes.
Pismo,
No.
Sheets,
Yes.
Stanger,
No.
Swanson,
Yes.
Zibble.
No.
So the RFP process will continue moving forward for the IT strategic plan. At this time, is there a motion to adjourn, or I should say, is there any other new business in the room? Seeing none, is there a motion to adjourn today's meeting?
So moved.
Motion made by Ms. Nunley. Is there a second? Seconded by Ms. McNamee. Trudy, can you please call the roll?
Epic,
Yes.
McNamee. Nunley.
Yes.
Pismo.
Yes.
Sheets,
Yes.
Stanger,
Yes.
Swanson, Zibble.
Yes. Thank you, everyone. We are adjourned at 6:20.